When we speak to spokespeople from the IDF, as we do regularly on this channel, they're always keen to underscore that with the figures of the number of people killed in Gaza, they say, but how do we know how many of those are terrorists? Is that sort of explanation and logic something that the Israeli public are comfortable with?
I would answer you in a question. 9,000 children killed. Is there any chance that they were terrorists? There was one day last week in which 162 babies were killed. Were they suspected as terrorists? Every 8 minutes there is a child killed in Gaza. Can we really justify everything and ignore everything? I mean, the 7th was a turning point, the 7th of October. It was a barbaric attack over Israel, but this does not mean that now Israel has the right to do whatever it wants. And, you know, there are terrorists killed, no doubt about it, and there was a need to do something. Obviously, every country has its own right to protect itself, but there should be also some limits, and I don't see those limits implemented.
Hey guys, I want to talk to you tonight. It's December 30th, 2023. Not sure when you're going to get this. As often as the case, I'm just going to riff because no time to prepare, but it's all in my head. And if I don't get it out into some permanent form, it will disappear and never be heard. And you won't hear this anywhere else. And tonight I'm talking about the connections between COVID and Gaza. Now, that may seem like a stretch, but give me some time here and you'll see that these stories are actually quite close. We are, for the time being, going to be alternating one day a story about Gaza, one day a story about our book, What the Nurses Saw, which of course is, it's one of the most important books written on the COVID era. I think there have been two really important books. A lot of books, but two important ones. One was Kennedy's The Real Anthony Fauci. He did do something positive there. People that have been following the plot for a long time know that we contributed, brass check, a ton of material to that book. We're cited 28 times. The next important book was Ed Dowd's book on vaccine injuries, which if you don't have the book, it just makes the whole situation, the whole catastrophe undeniable. And then our book, which is the only book so far, we're coming up on 4 years of COVID, it's the only book that shows that there was a system-wide system throughout the United States in every hospital that was treating COVID that basically promoted and enforced with an iron fist a protocol that killed people, not a few people here and there, as certain press outlets like CHD would have you believe, but by the hundreds of thousands. You probably all heard a story about one person or one family. You have to multiply that by tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. And our book, What the Nurses Saw, is the first and only book so far to address that. So I think those are the three books of the COVID era. So I want to talk about parallels between COVID and what's going on in Gaza. And again, bear with me. You'll see why this is an important discussion. Right. First, murder, death. They are killing people, and I mean the Israeli government with the help of the United States, because we're providing the armament and we're providing the political and cover and the economic support and the rhetorical support for these murders. They're killing people at a rate of about 10,000 per month. I'm afraid that's going to accelerate as the illness and disease and the destroyed health infrastructure starts to assert itself. But right now it's about 10,000 people per month, and then approximately 25,000 people are being injured every month. Well, if you look at the number of people that were killed by the COVID protocols, I think it was at least that much, probably a whole lot more. The difference being those deaths were occurring literally behind closed doors, one at a time. The families weren't able to see what was going on. They were blocked from witnessing. And all the families got back was a body with the statement, he or she died of COVID. So different, the Gaza thing is up front. It's in all of our faces that care to look and care to care. The COVID thing was very well hidden. But the numbers are equivalent. And I think the COVID murders in American hospitals on a numerical basis surpassed what's happening in Gaza. But they're at least on a similar scale, just executed differently. Long ago, a couple of decades ago, there was a lot of excitement among the psychopaths that run the world about something called the neutron bomb. And the idea of the neutron bomb was you could drop it, it would kill everybody, but it would leave the building standing. And that's that's pretty much what COVID was for the hospital system. It killed a whole lot of people and it left the infrastructure standing. Now, Gaza, of course, is diametrically opposed. They've killed people by the thousands, and they have injured them by the thousands, and they have also, with maximum Nazi-like cruelty, and yes, the Israeli government is behaving like the Nazis, and if you want to whine that that's anti-Semitic, go fuck yourself. So there it's old school. They're destroying everything. Schools, churches. Yes, there are churches in Gaza, mosques, hospitals, medical clinics, libraries, water treatment plants, everything that is required for people to survive. They're destroying while they are also murdering and injuring people. In the US, because we are more advanced, they used a neutron bomb strategy. They killed, I'm estimating hundreds of thousands of people, but they didn't damage any infrastructure at all. In fact, if you read our book, one of the people that we interviewed for the book says that there are hospitals around this country that took the COVID money they got and have built massive extra wings onto their properties. So it was a moneymaker. Now, Gaza, of course, is a moneymaker too. It's a moneymaker for the weapons manufacturers first and foremost. It's a moneymaker for all the people that all the Israelis that plan to go in there and steal that land and sell it off. And apparently there's already ads. You can already start buying land in northern Gaza. I have to confirm that. It was on Jimmy Dore. So basically money for the arms manufacturers. And of course, money for the U.S. Congress people who've all been bribed to provide cover for this. And who is the biggest paid politician in the United States? That would be from the Zionist lobby, the Israeli Zionist right-wing war party. I've called those people the war party for decades, right? Longtime viewers know none of this is new here. We've been on this story since we started in 1997. I've always called them the Israeli war party, and they are really showing their true colors, and they have spread money around. They own the news media in the United States, and by own, I mean bribed. They've bribed the Congress, and they bribed a lot of celebrities. They paid off a lot of celebrities. They paid off a lot of so-called influencers on social media. This is very, very similar, isn't it, to how they handled the COVID con, right? Every politician was in line. Maybe there were, 2 guys, maybe 3 guys total out of the whole Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives that actually stood up against the thing. And we've seen the same thing with Gaza. They've all got their mouths shut as they watch this. There's no words for what's going on there, and they all had their mouths shut for COVID. So there's another parallel. Another parallel is they have successfully, so far, not totally, but they've successfully created a great psychological operation in Gaza that anybody that suggests that murdering children in cold blood is a bad thing. Well, you're anti-Israel, and therefore you're an anti-Semite. I mean, literally, this is the nonsense that they have successfully sold, and I'm afraid most Americans are going along with it. Thankfully, not all of them. We probably see more demonstrations on behalf of the Palestinian civilians being murdered by Israel and the United States than we've seen about anything in this country in a long time. They did the same thing during COVID. Remember, you couldn't say anything about the masking. You couldn't point out that in the entire history of medicine, nobody ever believed that masks were going to prevent the spread of cold and flu. You couldn't point out that the meshing on the mask was way too big to stop virus particles, if you believe virus particles create disease and are not just a byproduct of disease. And you couldn't say anything like that. You couldn't point out that, gee, no one ever wore a mask 18 hours a day in a hospital. You couldn't point that out. You couldn't point out that nobody ever wore a mask, went to lunch, hung the mask from their ear, had their lunch, and put the mask on and went back to work. None of these things ever happened in the history of medicine. But if you pointed that out, you were a bad guy. If you questioned children being masked, toddlers being masked, if you questioned the schools being shut down, if you questioned small businesses and churches being shut down, you were an enemy of society, right? And then when the injections came out, some people call them gene therapy. I'm not even sure they're gene therapy. We don't know what they are, because you can't get the records of what was in those injections. If you get the paperwork, it's 90% redacted. So whatever those injections were, if you spoke out against them, if you questioned them, if you questioned the coercion of people getting them, if you questioned college students being coerced into getting vaccines in order to continue their education, if you questioned the coercion of employed people in continuing their jobs, if you questioned shithole places like Woodstock, New York, which had little Nazi guards out in front of rock and roll venues, checking everybody's vaccine passport. And if you hadn't been double vaxxed and boosted, you couldn't go in and watch rock and roll in Woodstock, New York. If you did any of those things, you were a bad guy. And my God, they've done the same thing with this Palestine massacre, this Gaza massacre, which, by the way, they're gearing up to spill over into the West Bank. They're already harassing those people beyond belief, and they're just setting it up for the next catastrophe. So interesting parallels, an enormous amount of propaganda, very well executed. Well, I don't say well executed, but because it's all absurd. I mean, even someone with an IQ of 80 should be able to see through this. But unfortunately, we got too many people in this country that if they were born with a high IQ, they have managed to allow their IQ to degenerate to a point that they can't even tell when they're being lied to. But in any event, the propaganda was not necessarily good, but it was voluminous, and it was a wall. I called it a steel wall 100 feet high. 2020, I was calling it. And they're doing the same thing with the Gaza story. So we have these parallels. Lots of deaths, lots of injuries, lots of useful idiots pushing the agenda, the news media shutting anybody down that dares to question what's going on, the Congress in lockstep. And it's a lot of the same, what do you call them, usual suspects, like that absolute piece of crap moron, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was the one pushing vaccines. Well, he's pushing murder in Gaza too. And it just goes down the line. It's almost the same group of people. The one exception, the one bizarre exception, which I don't understand, and I still, maybe I'm naive, I still have hopes that he's going to find his conscience and remember what family he's from, and remember who his father was, and remember who his uncles were. Even his grandfather wouldn't have put up with this shit. But right now, Bobby Kennedy is a leading rhetorical cheerleader for this thing. He's providing rhetorical cover, but pretty much it's the same deviance that pushed the masking and the shutdown of society and the coerced vaccinations, who are also pushing the wholesale slaughter of human beings in Gaza. So I think those are pretty much the the big point. None of these things came out of the blue. Okay, our medical system, and I was calling it way before COVID, is a medical dictatorship. They have been committing atrocities nonstop for as long as I've been alive. Okay, I think the first big atrocity was the war on anybody that was examining alternative treatments for cancer. If you dared question chemotherapy or radiation, you were hunted down like a dog if you were an MD, and God help you if you were successful in your treatments. Cancer is not one thing. It's not a monolith. There's all kinds of different kinds of cancers. Different people have it to a different degree. So to even say cancer, you're already inaccurate. But the record shows that there are a lot of treatments for various forms of cancer at various stages, which do not have to be radiation and do not have to be chemo. And if you're a doctor and you suggest that, God help you. You know, they will hound you out of business. So that's just one. The other example, I think, is this insane drive to vaccinate American children. It's uniquely American. I mean, we have some other sick countries like the UK and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, but most countries do not go for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 recommended vaccinations of children before they're 18. That's a uniquely American thing. And that's been going on for a long, long time. And we have absolutely cases of children being severely injured by these vaccines. And we don't know how many have had their overall health reduced, but we know the ones that have been seriously injured. And those families have been treated like absolute garbage. Cruelty beyond belief. From the news media, Anderson Cooper Vanderbilt, and other media scumbags, by the Congress, by the Department of Justice, because if you do have a child severely injured by a vaccine, you get to sue the United States government, and the Department of Justice provides the attorneys. And the current batch of attorneys have been given the orders, drag these cases on as long as you possibly can, give no quarter, beat these people into the ground. This has been going on for years and years and years, and we all tolerated it. And then the psychoactive drugging of children, giving children drugs routinely that in the 1970s would have been considered morally questionable to give to even severely disturbed mental patients. That was the level of ethical conversation in the 70s. Should we give psychoactive drugs to severely disturbed mental patients in institutions to help them, to make it easier to manage them? Okay, well, that went out the window in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. And now giving kids various psychoactive things, stimulants, depressants, antidepressants, sedatives, the equivalent of speed. If you look at Adderall is just 4 different kinds of amphetamine. Just look at the label. You don't need to be a scientist. You just need to not be an idiot. But anyway, that's been going on. Tens of millions of children are affected, have been injured by these drugs, and, we just let it roll. And then along comes COVID. COVID did not come out of the blue. Now let's look at the parallel in Gaza. The criminal government of Israel has been abusing the Palestinians since long before there was a country of Israel, right? We all think the Zionists, they're these great guys. They formed kibbutzes and they went out and they made the desert. No, they came with weapons, and they murdered and terrorized Palestinians. They did it before. Just look up the history. They murdered the officials of the British Protectorate, the people that were controlling Palestine. The Brits finally washed their hands of it, gave it to the UN. And then the UN gave it to the Zionists. I mean, anyone that says this is a Jewish homeland is insane. This is a homeland for psychopathic thieves and murderers, okay? There are Jewish people all over the world. They're doing fine. New York, Los Angeles, Toronto, Miami, Chicago. The idea that there's no safe place in the world except for Israel for Jews is insane. In fact, a lot of people who know what the hell's going on in this world will tell you it's one of the least safe places in the world for Jewish people. But anyway, just as we allowed this medical tyranny to grow year by year and abuse people in broad daylight, not by the hundreds, not by the thousands, not even by the hundreds of thousands, but by the millions, just as we allow that, we allow the nonstop abuse of Palestinian people in every possible way you can imagine. And now it's a crescendo. But it's not new. It didn't come out of the blue. It's been going on a long time. And these criminals, these psychopaths, and that includes the majority of Israeli citizens, think what's going on in Gaza is A-OK. And there's a percentage of them, a significant percentage of them, that think it's not enough. Okay, you can get this from watching there's polls that have been done. You can watch the media. You can listen to the comments from the politicians. You can listen to the comments from the people on the street. These people are absolute savages, right? They are like, they are practically the kind of people that would say the only good Indian is a dead Indian. All right, and that was a disgrace, and it's a stain on our country. Well, there's a whole country worth of people over in Israel saying that and similar things about Palestinians. So there actually are a lot of parallels. I think these are the two big battles of the day. We still need to fight the medical tyranny here. COVID is their great vulnerability because most people, dense as they are, have a clue that something really, really bad happened during COVID. And our book, What the Nurses Saw, is bringing that to light. And it's going to be, there's a lot of nurses that saw a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of families that have dead family members. And now maybe the medical profession's not going to stand up as a group. People that lost loved ones, they get a clue of how their loved ones were actually killed. And it's all available in the hospital records. They're not going to forget ever. That's hundreds of thousands of people. So that's one war, and we got to win it. And the place where we're going to win it, I think, is in the COVID thing. And I think it's going to be working with the families that had family members just straight up killed, right? The masks are off. Nobody's worried about that. The schools are back open. The small businesses are open. We don't have Nazis standing at the doorway of businesses, museums, concert venues, asking to see your COVID vaccine papers. I don't know if they're still coercing young people into getting vaccines in order to attend college. Knowing New York State, I bet they're still doing it. Knowing some of these shithole Ivy League schools, I'm sure they're doing it. But I think most colleges have decided that, wow, we don't need that anymore. So all that's gone. But what remains, and it's in the book, and the book is very clear, the system that they use to kill COVID patients is still in play. Now, we don't have as many people dying because we don't have as many people getting formal COVID diagnoses. But if you walk into a hospital with a formal COVID diagnosis and you hand yourself over to a hospital without an advocate, without somebody watching your back, there's a very good chance it won't go well for you. And you can read the book. We're putting on lots of post-book videos with interviews with experts to just go deeper and deeper and deeper into the subject. That's one front. The other front, and luckily we're not alone in the second front, obviously, is just looking at the savagery of the Israeli government, frankly, the Israeli people. And again, Israelis and Jews are not the same thing. There are probably more Jews in the United States by a factor of 10 who think what's going on in Israel is a crime against humanity of epic proportions. I'm going to safely bet that because there really aren't that many people in Israel. They managed to do a lot with our arms and our weapons and our financial underwriting. They managed to do a lot of harm, but there really aren't that many of them. I would be shocked if there isn't many multiples of Jewish Americans. If you ask them, will tell you that they don't want this. Should not be done in their name. So these are not Jewish people. These are Zionist people, and the militant brand of Zionism. Maybe there was a soft brand of Zionism. I don't know. The history shows these people have been murderous thugs since the minute they arrived in Palestine, and they're now showing their true colors. Just remember, the majority of Israelis right now, as I record this, December 30th, 2023, think that what's going on in Gaza right now is A-OK, and there's a significant percentage of them that think that the killing should be accelerated. This is the country that we're calling the great democracy of the Middle East. I mean, I just have to question the sanity, the intelligence, the integrity, the morality of anybody that would make that claim. But anyway, these two stories have a lot of parallels. I think I've laid them out, and I just wanted to lay this down so that you could see. And it's also an explanation of why we're putting a lot of time. Obviously, there's a lot of other issues that we usually like to cover a broad spectrum of stories. But these are the two places where we, humanity, has to win. We have to beat back this COVID fraud. It's not over. We have to expose what these people did. And we have to give whatever support we can to the civilians of Gaza and soon to be, and the West Bank and East Jerusalem as they are brutalized, tortured, and murdered and impoverished and in broad daylight. So I guess that's what Brass Check's going to be about, certainly for the first part of 2024. We pray they're going to stop the mass slaughter of Palestinians. And then the problem does not go away. Obviously, it's still a terrible situation. But what can I say? But the COVID thing, it's not over until every American understands what happened in those hospitals, why it happened, and who's responsible. And it's all in our book, and it's very well documented. It's the only book of its kind. We're getting some pretty good traction. The small podcasts are very interested in this. I've been quite busy. The $1 million podcasters, they're not interested. The $1 million nonprofit resistant groups, they're absolutely not interested. But we might get them. We might create enough of a noise that they're going to either have to let people know about this data, or they're going to look really, really bad. Knowing them, I think some of them would rather look really, really bad than do the right thing, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, parallels between the COVID catastrophe in Gaza. They are killing similar amounts of people, but differently. One behind closed doors in a medical setting, one at a time, and leaving the hospitals intact. And in Gaza, it's old school murder, except unlike the Nazis, they are actually bombing hospitals. I don't even think the Nazis bombed hospitals, but the Zionists of Israel, the right-wing lunatics who our government supports and our tax dollars subsidize, and we're sending them ammunition so they can keep up the murder. Those are the people who are doing this. All right, so that's Brass Check, and we'll see you next time.